Good morning.
All right. Well, super duper. Good. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If y'all could please be seated, we'd like to go ahead and start the Small Business Development Committee meeting today. And before we start, I would like to ask Representative Danny Mathis if he would lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the many blessings that you've given us. Help us as we sit and meet together to come up with ideas, to put people to work, small business. Let this be something that is in favor with you. And we thank you and you ask for your love and your protection over all of us. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Representative Mathis. Thank you very much for that. Well, as I said, I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I want to let our guests and speakers know how much I appreciate them being here today. And we've had some from Daniel. I think you've got the longest. You got the record as far as being here from California. That's a good one. Well, with any of that, we got a little bit of housekeeping since we have so many presenters. I would like to limit our talks to about 10 minutes, and give or take. If you've got less time, that's fine. If you need a little bit more time, that's fine. But we need to be mindful that we need to adjourn around 9:30, 9:45. We got session at 10. So with that being said, I would also like to talk to you about House Bill 776. That's the bill that we dropped during the last session. And one of the things that we want these hearings to do is to address some of those issues that we have with the bill, like the demand for charging, the growth in charging, and how we need to get ahead of the curve in that respect. And with that being said, we'll start with our first presenter, Daniel Witt from Lucid Motors. Thank you very much, Daniel, for coming here. You can sit at the table or take the podium, whatever you prefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Witt. I'm the head of local and state public policy for Lucid Motors. I'd just like to thank everyone off the bat for making time for me this morning to talk with you. Electric vehicles is a passion of mine. I've been in the industry for 10 years, and Lucid is actually my second manufacturer that I've worked for on behalf of the industry. I got to tell you right off the bat that in the 10 years I've been with or in the industry, public perception has changed dramatically as to the viability of electric vehicles. There's inherently a great deal of skepticism 10 years ago with even the potential for consumer adoption. And now, frankly, what you've seen, and to the chairman's point, is almost an admission or an acceptance of the sort of the the inevitability of the transition. Electric vehicles are safer, they're more powerful, they're obviously zero emissions, and represent a better value to consumers more broadly. And inherent within that is a complete destabilization of the internal combustion engine economy that has developed over 100 years. For public policymakers like yourselves, this is nothing short of a tremendous opportunity. I think some other speakers that will be speaking with you today will expand upon that, but to put it bluntly, you're not just talking about roads and bridges, you're talking about industry as a whole, supply chain, consumer adoption, infrastructure, a whole host of different policy matters that, again, developed over 100 years for internal combustion engines. But because of the imperatives associated with transitioning to zero emission transportation, that ultimately needs to occur a lot quicker. So again, I really appreciate you, the opportunity to come and speak before you today. There's a couple things that I'd like to touch on, but would be happy to reserve a little bit of my time for questions if there are any. It is probably worth me mentioning a little bit about my company, since we are a startup. Lucid Motors just began delivering cars to customers in this last month. The thing that makes us a little bit different than your average bear is that our vehicle is the first one that's going to be mass produced with a range in excess of 500 miles. Now, this comes at a pretty heavy price point, but it's the technology that really sets us apart. We use the same size battery pack as the competitors in the industry who only get 350 to 400 miles. So for the same price in the battery pack, the same size battery pack, we're able to stretch that range an additional 100 miles. Our technology also allows us to recharge 300 of those miles in about 20 minutes. We see this as a game changer for the industry from even just a couple of years ago. And that's why, frankly, we like to come and speak to policymakers as often as possible, because the evolution of this industry has happened in real time. Just in the past 10 years, you've seen battery costs being reduced 90% versus what they were before. And again, if we're able to leverage that with additional efficiency, which is really the name of the game for us and not a terribly novel concept, we can take those lower costs of the battery pack and ultimately make a lower cost car. We're at the start of that process for us as a company right now. We're currently producing a sedan that just as of yesterday received the 2022 Motor Trend Car of the Year award. It's new off the tongue for me, so I apologize for bragging slightly, but this further evidence to suggest that this technology is ready for prime time and ready for adoption. Now, it's not just going to be from our cars. Certainly, our capacity at our plant in Arizona is only about 30,000 vehicles annually for the moment. We're going to up that in the next couple of years to about 90,000 vehicles annually. But just to put that in perspective, Toyota is going to sell about 800,000 cars this month. So we're a blip on the radar, which is why, frankly, it's probably appropriate for me to come before the Small Business Committee in this context. But the chairman did ask me to speak very briefly about one or two issues that the Georgia legislature ultimately might want to hear about from what some other states are doing. So I do want to pay a little bit of respect to that. The issue that I'd like to bring to the table, unfortunately, isn't a new one, but and it's frankly a little bit tricky. But if you'll bear with me through it, Lucid wants to invest more in Georgia. We're unable to do so right now because the state is both for and against a certain policy known as direct-to-consumer sales that ultimately allows certain manufacturers, in this case, in the state of Georgia, a single large volume manufacturer to own and operate its own distribution footprint with sales and service locations in the state. It's worth noting that manufacturer has sold in Georgia more than 80% of all the electric vehicles in the state last year. The traditional dealer framework, unfortunately, doesn't have quite as good a record. They're getting better, of course, but last year, 0.1% of all the vehicles they sold were electric vehicles. This amounts to a little less than 2 electric vehicles per dealership in the state in a year. As a new entrant, we are seeking the opportunity that every manufacturer has had before us to ultimately pick the distribution model that best matches our ability to grow and provide our consumers what we deem to provide our consumers the best opportunity for service and reliability from a brand perspective. We've seen the success, frankly, of franchise dealers over the last 100 years, and we've seen the success of the direct-to-consumer model over the last 10. We ultimately think electric vehicles, as I've stated now in my prior testimony, are inherently different and require rethinking certain ways from which we've done things as past precedent. I would tell you that direct-to-consumer sales is legal in 8 of the 10 largest car markets in the United States. It's legal in the largest state by population, California, as well as the smallest, Wyoming. And it's worth noting that in Georgia, just as every other state, the precedent here has been established that a manufacturer can come in and sell directly to consumers, and still the traditional framework will thrive. There's been no challenge to the traditional franchise dealer framework by the presence of this manufacturer, and we would submit that this is a rising tides lifts all boats type scenario. In fact, the dealer's own data would prove that out, that they're able to sell more cars, that they're able to hire more people, and that their profits grow even more in the presence of having more competition. The franchise legislation that was put into place was established to provide protections for franchises against the manufacturers that they represent. We absolutely believe those are important. But we ultimately believe that legislation that law that's in place right now has been manipulated to prevent newer manufacturers with different business models like ours, like Rivian's, like Fisker's, from entering the state and becoming more of a partner with the state as we seek to be. At the end of the day, we don't see this as a zero-sum game. As I've said, Tesla has been here for many years and has thrived. We believe that we can do so here as well. We believe this economy is something that, and the state is a place where we'd very much like to be. So I'd ask, we do have, there's legislation currently before the Motor Vehicle Committee on the House, HB 460, and we'd very much like your support with that legislation. But more than that, I think we'd very much appreciate any ongoing discussion on this topic in particular. It is not the panacea when it comes to electric vehicle policy. I much prefer to talk about everything that I mentioned previously, but it is a thorny issue that deserves to be addressed in full, and put to bed. Because unfortunately, it's stagnating the type of adoption and economic growth that we ultimately think the state of Georgia would benefit from. So with that, I appreciate the time. I apologize if I went a little bit longer than expected, but again, I thank you very much, and be happy to answer any questions if the chairman is allowing.
Well, we've got time for 1 or 2 questions. Number 23.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I won't ask this as a question, but I will say that I do have some concerns and have had for a couple of years now about some of these new electric vehicle manufacturers bypassing the dealership structure, because these dealerships have been the backbone of the automobile industry forever. You couldn't sell vehicles without these local dealers all across this state that service the product after the sale, et cetera. The question is, though, that I've had this just in the last few weeks, is charging stations, in particular across rural parts of the state. And this goes back to part of the conversation in bypassing dealerships is the subsidization of this industry and not being able to have the dealers participate in that. And also the charging stations. We have people that would like to own electric vehicles, but I know in my community, there's like one charging station. What do you see? What is your involvement in the future installation of some of these charging stations, particularly around rural parts of the state?
Sure. No, I thank you for the question. There's a certain element of not putting the cart before the horse on this, and private industry has refused, candidly, to make the substantial investments required to create a sufficient network for charging. But some of that's been done with appropriate caution. And if you just allow me to explain, 10 years ago, the maximum range for an electric vehicle was around 85 miles of range. For a network of charging infrastructure to be created to supply to provide a sufficient level of confidence for consumers, you would have to invest a great deal more infrastructure than if the average range of a vehicle was 300 or 400 or 500 miles. Ultimately, what we've seen, even with in sort of the evolution from Tesla to Lucid, Tesla's electrical system is on a 400 volt system, which really maxes out its charging capacity around 200 to 225 kilowatts. The standard that's out there right now for the SAE combo, which all the fast charging standards will come out with now, is 350 kilowatts. And I know that you're going to have a couple of utilities speaking about capacity, and this is a separate issue, but related, especially when we talk about the rural landscape. In this case, you can have less total infrastructure while still supplying that same level of confidence. But you've got greater capacity needs. And ultimately, those charging rates require a great deal of energy in a short time when it ultimately is being called upon. So this is what I mean by we want to see more charging stations. And frankly, there needs to be more charging stations. The state has an interest in providing a basic footprint, but I humbly believe that, frankly, private industry, especially companies like ChargePoint and EVgo and other charging companies that have received subsidization from states, but also now are in the public markets, can ultimately provide a great deal of that need in the near future.
Quick follow-up, Mr. Chairman. So you want private industry to do the charging station infrastructure, but you want to bypass dealerships when it comes to selling a car directly to the people.
So
Now, and again, that wasn't a trick. I'm just trying to think through all this from 100,000 feet on how all this works, because I'm concerned that you can't have it both ways. You want to bypass the dealer. I also want you to come put in all the charging stations.
well, sir, first of all, we don't actually make charging stations. There are some manufacturers that do make charging stations. We're more focused on building the cars, but we are a private business. And I think this ultimately gets to the basic point that we are a private business that is ultimately seeking the ability to define the way that we would like to distribute vehicles. In this case, we see a lot of merit in the near term for us to be able to hire our own staff, our own support staff to ultimately facilitate the service of this technology, and invest in locations, because this is a fundamentally different process from sales to service through the whole period of ownership than it is to own an internal combustion engine. For a lot of the reasons you just identified, whether it's about charging infrastructure or the rates, ultimately this does require additional tutelage, we'll say, for the staff that ultimately is going to be engaged with the customer base. For those reasons and many others, frankly, I would tell you that 70% of dealer profits come from service. The internal combustion engine has about 500 moving parts in it. There are 5 in an electric motor. And that fundamentally just changes the paradigm from which the business model for dealers, as well as manufacturers, needs to abide. That's an evolution that's going to happen over the next 10 years. But I'm here today telling you that we're ready to invest in the state today, that we're looking for locations, that we want to grow in the state. And we can't wait 10 years for the dealers to ultimately sort out their business model. Their business model doesn't work for us today. And that's ultimately the crux of the issue we're trying to address.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Daniel, for being here. Can you stay a little bit later afterwards? Because I have plenty of questions and not enough time. So if you would stay afterwards, I'd greatly appreciate it. We really got off on a tangent because dealership issues was not the issue here. The issue is charging stations.
That's my fault, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry. So anyway, with that, Angela, I know you've got to get back. Please come on up and tell us what's going on in your industry and why we need chargers.
Absolutely. Good morning, Chairman Chokas and members of the committee. I'm Angela Holland. I'm president of the Georgia Association of Convenience Stores, and we represent roughly 2,000 of the more than 6,000 convenience stores in our state. With many of our locations on prime real estate, we're poised to be the leader of electrical vehicle consumption to Georgia drivers. In Georgia, there's approximately one convenience store in every 9 square miles, and this statistic puts convenience stores closer to Georgia drivers than any other retail channel. As such, we believe our stores are in the right locations to provide fuel. Whether that fuel is petroleum-based or it's an alternate fuel such as hydrogen, ethanol, biodiesel, natural gas, or electricity. Last week, Representative Bruce Williamson made the comment that convenience stores are agnostic on the type of fuel we provide. And while that's true, our current infrastructure only allows for petroleum fuels. As of today, there are a couple of factors that hinder retailers from investing in electrical vehicle charging stations. One is the current lack of vehicles on the road. Two is the cost of electrical chargers or installing chargers. 3 is the rapid evolution of charging technology. And the 4th is the inability to resell electricity in Georgia. Our industry really finds ourselves in a which came first, the chicken or the egg scenario. As manufacturers begin to produce more electric vehicles, the customer base will eventually come. But in the meantime, retailers need to know that they can recoup their investment in chargers. They need to be able to resell power the same manner as they currently resell petroleum products. This is the only way to keep the refueling market competitive. Currently, the term fast charging refers to a 20-minute charge to fill up, while at-home charging takes hours. Last week, Ford Motor Company announced that it's teamed up with Purdue University to invent charging technology that can make fueling an electric vehicle as fast as filling a gas tank. They say the trick is to keep the charging cables cool while large amounts of energy pass through them. But while there's already liquid cooling technologies on the market, Ford says the key is to changing the liquid to a vapor to enable much faster charging. The professors at Purdue say they'll begin testing the liquid prototype within the next 2 years. This is yet another example of how rapidly changing technology has hampered retailers from investing in chargers. Combine the newest technology in liquid cooling chargers, growing electric vehicle customers, and the ability to resell fuel, Georgia's convenience store retailers will be able to have a competitive market in which to provide electricity for the purposes of travel. Our members are in the business to provide convenience, and as such, we look forward to the challenges and the changes in the fueling landscape and are proud to be part of the solution. Thank you, Chairman Chokas, for your time this morning. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
We've got a minute or two, number 26.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Angela, good morning. I don't understand some of the industry, so I'm going to ask a question based on like the ink print, the inkjet printers versus the cartridges. If I was to go buy a gas station today, would I have to be responsible for purchasing the gas pumps and the fuel tanks in the ground, or when I sign with a particular supplier, do they provide those to me? Do you know how that works at a?
It varies.
Okay.
It just depends on who. It depends on whether or not you're going as branded or unbranded.
Okay.
meaning
So if I was branded, then, and that means
so
I
if you're
I signed
branded,
a contract.
they could, it depends on your contract. I mean,
Okay,
there's a
gotcha.
lot of different scenarios out there.
Okay, so that would probably be a business model maybe for the charging ports as well. Is that the case? I guess it could be, right? That
It
as
could
an
be,
option.
but I
Okay.
guess the issue is there's already 6,000 convenience stores in the states that are already ready to do petroleum fuel.
Yeah.
So at this point now, it's breaking ground, breaking concrete, putting those in, installing, everything from a different electric meter. It's a lot of
Okay.
it, a lot of expense.
Maybe if
goes into
somebody
that.
else will address that too as we continue through. Thank you so much, though.
Angela, thank you very much. I know we have other people. Well, we're gonna have time. We'll do, oh yeah, okay. We've got a few more seconds. Number 11.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you know what is the cost to install a charging station? Do you know, is that available?
So that varies as well, and that's going to vary depending on how fast that charger charges,
Right.
who you're buying it from. I mean, they can run upwards of $200,000 to put in a charger when you start breaking ground and breaking up concrete and replacing it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good, thank Angela, thank you. If y'all have any more questions for Miss Angela, I think you know how we can find her. So thank you very much, Miss Angela. Jeff Pratt, if you would come, I know you're on a limited schedule via Zoom. Oh, good, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. It's good to see you again. I appreciate your attendance at our groundbreaking in Lee County, Georgia, for our new solar farm that we're putting there. And it's so good to see members of the committee as well. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share a little bit about the electric cooperatives in the state of Georgia. I am president of Green Power EMC, and I represent the electric cooperatives in the state. There's 38 of those that we represent that serve about 65% of the land area, and about over 4 million Georgians. The cooperatives are real excited about the transition that seems to be taking place to electric vehicles in the United States and really around the world. We're finding that as we work with our customers to help them understand more about the advantages of electric vehicles, they are getting excited about them as well. I think that this technology is more efficient and cleaner and offers a lot of economic benefit for the state of Georgia. I've personally spoken and met with companies that have both located and are looking to locate in Georgia to manufacture parts and cars that will create lots of jobs and billions of dollars in investment for the state. So we are supporting those efforts and continue to find ways to encourage and customers to understand more about EVs and how the adoption of those cars. Some of the programs that our cooperatives are offering are really groundbreaking in a lot of respects. One cooperative in particular, Cobb EMC, has a program called the Night Flex program, where they are providing 400 kilowatts a month of electricity that's free of charge for customers to charge, as long as it's at nighttime when it doesn't affect the peak demand quite as much as other periods. Other cooperatives have incentives that provide free charging for a year, and other incentives that provide opportunities for customers to get over barriers that they may have a reluctancy to engage with electric vehicles. They're doing show and drive programs. Show and drive programs are very important, but excuse my language, but that's really a part of getting butts in seats, so people can really understand and get a sense of that electric vehicles are fun to drive and very engaging and easy to drive. All of these programs do help, but there are some challenges in the state and some challenges in the country. First, there aren't a lot of vehicle options for today for our customers. There are sedans, some crossover SUVs that are coming about, but in the rural areas that many of our cooperatives serve, they need pickup trucks. Well, those are on the horizon. We're excited about the F-150, the Rivian, and other opportunities that we're seeing emerge, but it's going to take a while for that to happen. And we'll see the emergence of that more quickly than you can imagine, but we have to be patient and work on those topics very carefully. I would say that another issue that has been brought up in previous testimony today is public charging. While we expect that 85% of charging will occur at the home, people want comfort, and they want to know that the range of vehicles will get them where they want to go, especially investing tens of thousands of dollars in a vehicle. I'm very encouraged by the 500-mile vehicle that the gentleman from Lucid Motors mentioned. That's exciting. Other vehicles are going that direction too. But today, for example, I drove to Savannah, Georgia, the last few days, and I would need public charging to get home, and that's okay. So we are very encouraged, very excited to work with the business community, the convenience stores, and others to help make that transition and create opportunities and work with them to make the moving from petroleum to electricity for charging one that works well. I would say one topic that I think would be important that I hear quite often is, can the grid take all this new charging? The fact is it can. In Georgia, our electric grid is one of the most strongest, robust grids in the country, and we're really proud of that. I would say that the current supply chain challenges that we all have today means that we need some lead time to make sure we have the equipment to make sure electric service is available to the commercial entities that want to provide this service. There's also brought up a topic that's important, and that is this providing a service to customers and really billing for that service based on the amount of electricity that's used to charge a particular car. We're open to engaging the different parties that are a part of that, and think that there are ways that we could make that work in the state, and would look forward to further engagement with convenience stores and others that have an interest in that particular topic. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll close my remarks and just say that thank you again for the opportunity to share and the opportunity to engage, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Good. Jeff, thank you. It was great seeing you down in my part of the country. And we're excited about the development of those solar arrays down there. I've got one question, and unfortunately, we're going to have to limit the questions because of time, and we've got a full program. But capacity we were talking about, and you were talking about, some of the incentives, and that they could have 400 kilowatts at certain times of the day and night. With the green energy that y'all are producing, is that going to be limited to certain times of the day and the night? How will that affect the charging and the consumers?
It's a great question. And that it is true that the whole grid itself, the sources of energy are changing, but we have I will say that with our nuclear investment, which is emission free, we have a strong base of generation that's going to supply energy day and night and be available to meet those demands for electricity almost any time. The growth of renewable energy, intermittent energy sources is a challenge, but we're managing that challenge and taking advantage of new technologies like batteries to help make sure that the grid remains affordable and remains reliable. And we're confident we can do that and going forward. And we don't think electric vehicle charging is no different than any other load that we serve. It'll be in places that we haven't had to install large amounts of electricity sources, but we do that every day. And we're excited about engaging and making this work. So we're not going to have a problem with that, Mr. Chairman.
Jeff, thank you. Thank you for those words of encouragement, because we're all concerned about that. And that's great. And again, thank you for your investment in my part of the country. With
Yes,
that, Jeff, thank you. Lincoln Wood, would you be kind enough to come on up? Thank you.
Chairman Chokas, committee, good morning. My name is Lincoln Wood. I'm the Electrification Policy Manager for Southern Company. That's a mouthful, so I won't say that again in my comments, hopefully, because I got it right the first time. But I should share with you that I serve with Representative Williamson on the Electric Mobility Innovation Alliance in both the policy and workforce committees. And I echo his comments from our last meeting that the future in Georgia, it's electric. And it's so much more than the passenger cars that you and I might drive. So Georgia Power and Southern Company have a long history in the e-mobility space. I thought I might take a moment this morning and share with you some of the things that we're doing at the company. First off, if you buy an EV, we offer a $250 rebate for an in-home level 2, so 240 volt, that's dryer voltage charger. We also offer a time of use rate that gives you super off-peak charging for 1 cent per kilowatt hour from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. So some of that is driven by how much you drive, but ballpark estimate, you can charge your EV for about $20 a month. So I don't know about you, but that seems like a pretty good deal. But beyond that, we've had some conversations this morning around infrastructure. So I want to share with you specifically 2 of our EV infrastructure, EV charging programs. You've probably seen at least one of them, and that's the Georgia Power Community Charging Program. It's the Georgia Power branded charging that you may see around the state. That program is installed around interstate corridors, the idea of making the state EV ready, EV corridor ready. So if you drive an EV, we're trying to pull down the idea of range anxiety, that you can get where you have to get if you take a road trip, to Jeff's comments earlier. Georgia Power owns and operates that infrastructure, and we search for business partners who want to serve as site hosts, that they provide 2 charging spaces for EV charging, and they get the benefit of having EV drivers stop at their business. And as EV drivers, we all benefit because we get the ability to make the drive around the state. We have 54 EV charging sites around the state currently in that program. Our other program, which is new, is our Make Ready program. So just a little quick EV knowledge. From the meter to the charger itself that you see, there's conduit underground, there's switchgear, everything that has to happen. In the community charging program, Georgia Power owns and operates everything that's why it's branded. The Make Ready program, Georgia Power installs everything up to the pad the charger sits on. From that point, the customer takes care of the charger or whatnot. And that program is a little bit different, because if you remember, the community charging program is focused on range anxiety, public charging. Make Ready focuses on not just public, it could be employee charging. It could be fleet electrification. So installing charging at a fleet depot, for example. And although it's a business targeted program, multifamily apartment complexes can also benefit from that program. And so that's a newer program. So funding levels, just to give you some idea, for the community charging program, that's $6 million over 3 years. The Make Ready is 18 million over 3 years. So a total of 24 million invested. And one of our newest programs that we've done, that we've worked on really through the pandemic, is around fleet electrification. So you think about Georgia, you think about all our warehouses, and if you're a package delivery company, anything that you need to deliver and you have a large number of vehicles, 50, 100 vehicles that are all in one place, they go out during the day, do their delivery cycle, whatever that is, their duty cycle, as it were, they come back at night. One way to meet if the business has a sustainability goal, so they don't reduce carbon emissions, or to my earlier comments that it's cheaper to operate those vehicles on electricity versus perhaps diesel or gasoline. If you want to convert those to electric, how do you do it? So Georgia Power has a turnkey service where we can assist customers as much or as little as they need. So that could be analyzing their fleet to give them suggestions on what type of vehicles they should think about and converting to. It could be providing a list of contractors to do the installation itself, taking advantage of our Make Ready program. It could even be connecting customers with vendors that can provide financing to make that switch. And part of my role at Southern is also working with the OEM community so that we understand from a charging provider perspective, from a vehicle perspective, from a battery technology perspective, what's coming, what's the next iteration of the technology, so that we understand how to provide energy and what that means for us going forward. One other thing I wanted to update you on, you probably saw the news yesterday, President Biden signed the infrastructure bill. And so there's a lot of stuff in there, and I won't go through all of that in the interest of time, but I did want to hit 2 quick points. For the state around electric vehicle infrastructure, there are 2 main pieces that we want to know. The bill provides $5 billion in funding nationwide, but it's a formula funding program for EV charging. That means Georgia has an allocated amount that's around $135 million or so that will come to us. That funding, as with federal funding, there are specifications on how the funding can be used. The state will need to have a plan, submit the plan to the federal DOT or whatnot, but that's already allocated to us. The other piece of it is $2.5 billion in competitive grant funding. So that's open nationwide. That pot of money is for EV corridor charging and other programs, but anyone can apply for that. So just know that those are kind of the 2 big buckets that are already out there. And that one other thing you should know, at least for the $5 billion, that money has already been appropriated. So that money should get here quicker. It won't have to go through the appropriations process as other parts of the bill might. So I say, quicker in quotes. It'll still take some time to get implementation already set up, but just wanted to kind of cover that this morning. And the last thing I wanted to leave with you, just because I think it's interesting and a little bit relevant in the conversation this morning, part of my pandemic, I guess, project, so to speak, I've had the opportunity to restore or start restoring my 1957 Chevy Bel Air, which you might say is not electric, and you'd be right. But it was the first car my grandparents ever bought. So I had some chance to pull, the history on it. And I learned a couple of things I thought you might find interesting. First off, it was sold at a Georgia dealership in September of 1957. And it was manufactured in Atlanta in the summer of 1957. Even today, it is still providing Georgia jobs because the restoration work, upholstery, paint, all of that is happening here in the Atlanta area. So I think about that and I look at the parallel between what was then and what we're trying to do today. And I think about Bruce's comments again. We can do this. We have done this. I know there are issues that we need to work through. Even as we do that, I look forward to working with our stakeholder base here in the state so that one day in the future, we can look back and see how we changed the state and we made this opportunity happen for electrification. Thank you so much for having me. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
One question, and that is, you said you had 54 charging stations currently located around the state.
Yes, in the community charging program.
Okay, and they are branded Georgia Power, Southern
They
Company?
are. They are branded Georgia Power.
Okay, and it's legal for y'all to resell electricity because y'all are the producer. How much do you charge for a car to come in and charge, or are those free?
So for our community charging stations, we actually sell by time, just like any other provider in the state. And it's 25 cents per minute to charge.
25 cents per minute. Gotcha. And how long does it take to actually charge the average electric vehicle?
So many factors influence that, from the temperature of the battery to the state of charge of the battery itself. So it's not a linear situation where you go stick in a gas nozzle and 5-7 minutes later you have a full tank. For a battery, if the battery is almost empty, it's going to charge much faster and it slows down as it fills up. For fast charging, you only charge the battery to about 80% because at that point your charge rate drops off significantly, with the idea that you don't want to burn up your battery on the car, right? So if you're going to charge, it may take 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatnot. It could even take an hour, but there's variables in there That's up to the EV driver to figure out, where is your next pit stop? Because as you drive an electric vehicle, it's a little, the way to do it is a little bit different. You don't just fill up your vehicle and go. You supercharge to get to or you fast charge to get to the next fast charging site. So you may not need to fill all the way up. So you may only need to hang out for 15 minutes or maybe 20 minutes because you're not trying to fill the battery all the way up. I know that was probably not the one number you wanted, but there are a lot of variables in there. For reference, you could say 20, 30 minutes is a general guideline, but just realize there's times either side of that.
No, that was perfect. Lincoln, thank you. No, that was really good. It gives us an idea. We haven't had an idea yet on what it's costing. So 25 cents a minute for 20 minutes is $5. So $7.50 for 30 minutes and you sit around and buy a hot dog. All good. Well, Lincoln, thank you very much. If you could stick around, I'm sure many of my members want to talk with you and get some more information, but thank you very much for your presentation.
Of course.
Cool. And Frank, is Frank here? Yeah, Frank, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I believe you'll be pleased to hear that I can help you with your time constraints today. And the reason for that is that MEAG Power is the all requirements wholesale provider to the 49 municipal electric systems in Georgia. The bottom line there is that we have no meters. We have no retail customers. So I'm here today to expound a little bit on remarks that have already been made by my colleagues with the other generating and transmitting utilities in the state. And that is what we consider our abundant supply of wholesale energy that's available to those 49 municipal systems. As a matter of fact, MEAG got its start, I'd have to go back and count, 40, 50 years ago, when the first 2 units at Plant Vogtle were under construction. And a number of players came to the table to get that plant across the finish line. MEAG, on behalf with 50-year contracts with those municipal systems, ended up acquiring almost a quarter of ownership in the facility. And as such is entitled to that same amount of any investment that's ever made on the site again. And as we all know, units 3 and 4 are subject to come online pretty soon. And we have our entire ownership share of those 2 units as well. Just a side note, as a consequence of those heavy nuclear investments, MEAG is and will become even more so one of the lowest carbon emitting utilities in the Southeast. But we're not dependent on one energy source. We are partners in several Georgia Power coal plants. Of course, those aren't being utilized to near the extent they were, but they're there when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing. So, and they can be ramped back up really quickly compared to some other resources. So that's there. We also have solar in the queue. We have our own 100% ownership of a combustion gas turbine unit. And the cities are entitled to the SEPA hydro output of the lakes around the Southeast. So MEAG wheels that energy to the cities as well. So you will hear from the retail side of the municipals, I believe, the speaker following me, and he'll be able to address some of those things. But as the other speakers have indicated, and since we are all co-owners in a number of plants, and incidentally, we, the 3 big utilities in the state jointly own the integrated transmission system, commonly known as the ITS, another huge asset in ensuring that, that energy is deployable to all corners of the state. So I think that's about all I've been asked to report on, Mr. Chairman, but happy to answer any questions if there are any. And thank you for the opportunity of being here today.
Frank, thank you very much. I appreciate your presentation. And as I said, I want you to stay a little later so if any of the members have a question. But one of the things that I do want to make a comment about in your presentation and others is the fact that the state of Georgia has invested in energy through MEAG, EMC, Georgia Power, and that from what I'm gathering, adding electrical vehicles to the marketplace is not going to put a burden that we're not prepared for.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now Walter West, if you would come up. He's going to be via Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank
Good. My name is Walter West. I am Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer with the Electric Cities of Georgia, which is a statewide organization for 52 public power members. Before I go into my professional comments, just on a personal level, I too look forward to my first electric vehicle that I could travel the state both for business purposes and personal purposes, and have confidence that the charging stations would allow me to travel the state and get back on the same day. I've already switched most of my power tools from gas to electric, so I'm looking forward to a vehicle as well. ECG recognizes the current and future anticipated growth of electric vehicles and impending necessary charging infrastructure in Georgia. As a matter of record, many of our 52 member communities have already installed and invested in charging stations in their downtown centers to support EV technologies. Additionally, ECG and its member utilities have worked closely with various retailers that have installed EV charging stations. We are currently working with a strategic partner to facilitate use of improved data management systems specifically for EV charging impacts to the electric distribution system. ECG welcomes the opportunity to work with our members and their EV charging customers in developing an electric distribution infrastructure that supports EV charging on a broader basis. Additionally, we look forward to working closely with our members and all interested parties to identify these key business drivers, EV consumer charging patterns, and related business practices to create win-win opportunities for EV charging technologies in the state of Georgia. And that concludes my presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
We have a minute or two. Walter, are there any questions from members of the committee? Well, super. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Cool. All right. And now, Allie Kelly, if you would be kind enough to come up and
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this hearing. I'm actually going to steal a few minutes from Walter because I'm excited to be here and I have a ton to share with y'all. There are some folks on the committee who have been with me down on the Ray Highway on Interstate 85 doing the tour. And so y'all know how much I can talk. I'm going to try to hold myself back from going on for too long. But I do, for background, I'm Allie Kelly. I'm the executive director of the Ray. We're a 501c3 nonprofit charity. We've been around for 7 years. There's a very specific stretch of Interstate 85 in West Georgia near LaGrange and West Point. We've been working with Georgia DOT and Federal Highways Administration to onboard transportation technology projects really over a 6-year period. And we've developed over the course of those 6 years, the nation's premier test bed for advanced mobility. So when you think about smart cars, connected and autonomous cars, I won't get into flying cars, but let's just go to CVs and AVs, as well as EVs. So we've been sort of running ahead of other DOTs and pioneering these technologies because all of us want Georgia to lead. And in order for Georgia to lead, we have to stop doing the new stuff in the back room and our private labs. And we have to start figuring out how to bring it into the public space. So that's essentially the Ray. We've onboarded 12 projects plus over the last 6 years. And this part's really cool. We're now working with 15 states in total. So the little, kind of strange idea that came about in 2015 after this body worked with Governor Deal to dedicate the highway as the Ray C. Anderson Memorial Highway. And then we had this strange idea that maybe it could be a test bed. Maybe we could lead the rest of the country, maybe even the world. And we're starting to see the fruits of that labor. We're working with not California. We're working with Alabama, with Oklahoma, with Michigan, with Minnesota, with Maine, with Maryland. We're working with Colorado, with Arizona, and with Oregon. And the projects that we've onboarded onto the Ray Highway, they're really varied, but I want to tell you about our very first project. In August of 2015, we onboarded a 50 kW charging station backed by 12 solar panels. It's grid connected, and so it operates 24/7. Doesn't matter what the weather is. It doesn't matter what's going on with the solar panels. The solar panels are just there to supplement the EV charging station with some solar power, of which we have so much in Georgia, right? That 50 kW charging station is at the Georgia DOT rest area, one of our 9 gateway rest areas into the state of Georgia from other states. So the one that I'm referring to sits on the banks of the Chattahoochee River in the city of West Point, and it welcomes people home from Auburn when Auburn's lost another game to Georgia. Let me tell you about my rest area, because for a minute, I'm going to tread on Commissioner McMurray's territory. And I'm going to pretend that it's my rest area. I love it. It's there with restrooms and dog walks 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. It's there with clean restrooms. And most days you'll find someone from economic development super friendly who can tell you how to get to the aquarium or the state capitol. We had to offer the EV charging station charging services for free. And we had to do that because federal law prohibits commerce on the interstate system. And I'm here just to raise your awareness of this issue. We commonly call it commercialization, right? We don't want to allow commercialization on the interstate system, but this is quickly going to become not an issue of commerce, but an issue of safety. Because Representative Laricchia, you've already pointed out you don't have enough charging in your area. I'm gonna tell you something. We don't have enough charging in rural areas. And in some rural areas, your best bet is to go in with charging stations at a rest area, a clean, well-kept rest area, or a DOT truck parking lot. So that's part of what we've been fighting for at the Ray. We've been fighting for this with the current administration. Would love your help, in the form of a resolution. That's just an idea. I'm going to move on, though. I want y'all to know that in 2020, the COVID year, my little C3, my charity, tore out the 50 kW station. We're trying to refurbish it for the city of West Point to use. And we installed a 175 kW charging station. Still got the 6 solar panels, but I can supercharge your charging experience in about 18 minutes to get you in and out of that rest area. I did that as a nonprofit, which just tells you that the technology is there, it's accessible, this is doable. And since we did the project in-house, I'm going to tell you how much it cost. The charging station cost us $80,000. The city of West Point funded the utility upgrades. It cost $8,000 to put a new transformer in. And I mentioned that the charging is free. So that's an ongoing O&M that we have. But it's a great charging station. It's the fastest charge you can get on the interstate system. And we're really proud of that because we're showing people how to do it. And that's what Georgia does, right? We show people how to do it the right way. It's the same thing with our red state solar. I'm going to just move quickly through the rest of my comments. I also had the opportunity to serve on the Governor's Electric Mobility Innovation Alliance. I just want y'all to know we've got some other great Georgia companies who can inform y'all about charging. Heliox is a new Georgia company based in Atlanta. Their North American division makes EV charging infrastructure for buses and heavy trucks. So Class 8 trucks that are coming fully electric can be charged by a Georgia company's infrastructure called Heliox. Also Southwire. Did y'all know Carrollton, Georgia's Southwire manufactures the cables and the parts for EV chargers? That's a new and growing division of Southwire. Really proud that they're a partner of the Ray. I just want y'all to know that we've heard from the lovely woman from the convenience stores. I got nothing against convenience stores. What I'm here to tell you, well, number one, I know my mama told me free don't scale. So free charging at rest areas and DOT truck parking is not going to go faster or farther than the Ray Highway. So I want to see everyone getting fed at the table. And I think there's plenty of food for the convenience stores, for the truck stops, for the rest areas, for the DOT truck parking. I think we got plenty of market share that we can share and that we can all do well servicing this market share. I also want you to know I'm an EV driver and I drive my EV out of state. I've been to Boone, North Carolina. I've been to Amelia Island, Florida. My daddy is from Savannah. I go down there all the time. We stop at Metter. We get barbecue at Bevericks, and I pick up a 7-layer piece of cake from Bevericks. So I'm really familiar with the planning that is required because the infrastructure isn't completely built out yet. But I'm here to tell you that I use the charging station at Parker's next to Bevericks, and I got nothing against convenience store charging, and I got nothing against truck stop charging. I just think we need all of us. We need all hands at the table. We need to be leveraging every possible opportunity to build out the infrastructure. And just as a side note, you know, GDOT has a gratuities prohibition. So GDOT itself can't give the charging away for free. It's just a nonprofit like the Ray that can do that. So we got a real issue I could use your help with. It's a federal issue. I'm aware of that, but I just wanted to raise your awareness. I also just want to say, while we're talking about options on the table, you know, as far as the dealerships are concerned, I think the dealerships have been doing really well over the last few years while Tesla has been in our market. You know, we have a loophole for Tesla that they've used over the last 7 years to go direct with hundreds of thousands of their EVs. So I think the last 7 years of data proves that the dealerships can do well in a competitive environment that includes a different business model like direct to consumer. I'll let the dealers tell you about the data of how they've done over the last 7 years, but my understanding is that it's year-over-year growth, taking the COVID piece out of it. The last thing that I want to say, so this is the part that I want to leave you with to make sure that y'all have an idea of where we're going with charging. I serve on the board of a National Science Foundation Engineering Research Center. That's a mouthful, so we just say NSF-ERC, but it's based in Utah, and they've figured out how to discharge power to electric vehicles while you're driving. Y'all are thinking that I've taken you to a place that can't be true, but actually Michigan DOT last month released an RFP for the first mile of inductive charging in a lane. It's going to be in the Tri-County area of Detroit. They've got it funded within the DOT, and it will be a mile long. Actually, Indiana beat Michigan. Indiana announced a 3-year project with a company called Magment to do inductive, which is just a fancy word for wireless. No wires while you're driving. I know. They can transfer energy using a magnetic field. So they actuate a magnetic field from coils in the road, and they can transfer alternating current energy over that magnetic field. So as we think about charging, let's not only think about pedestals on concrete with wires that require cooling. Let's also think about how we install wireless charging at the Savannah port or the Brunswick port for the Class 8 trucks that are in queue. This is going on already at the ports of LA, Seattle, and Portland. How do we do that here on the East Coast? And also let's think about charging in a lane as a way to ease range anxiety, particularly with the fleets of vehicles that are delivering products for Christmas time over the road. Think about the Amazon trucks, the Walmart trucks, the UPS trucks hometown, the FedEx trucks, and how we can be thinking about infrastructure as a multifaceted way to approach range anxiety. That's all I really wanted to say, other than thank you for the opportunity. Y'all are my friends and my colleagues, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, super. I've got one or two questions.
Shoot.
And the first one you alluded to with the mile or the highway for charging. If a car is traveling on that highway and they're doing 60 miles an hour, they're going to only get 1 minute of charge.
Mhm.
How much is that
Yeah.
as far as automobile is concerned?
So what they do is they align the coils so that the zone of charging is continuous, even though the coils are not one continuous piece of infrastructure. And you have to do this for miles in order to power your journey, as well as to get, we call it snacking. Okay, it's not a meal. You're not going to get a meal in the lane if you're an EV, but you're going to get a snack, and it's going to help to get you to the next supercharging depot. It ends up being current state of technology. So this will be wrong tomorrow, but current state of technology is that it requires 1 megawatt per mile. I have actually driven on a charging road in person receiving 25 kW. That same road has been torn up and it now is able to charge at 50 kW. And the goal for the large trucks is to get it between 60 and 100 kW. Think about 80 kW as the sweet spot. Now, these are numbers, right? And what do they mean? I'll just give you the points of reference. So in 2015, the Ray installed a 50 kW charging station with wires, and we thought that was hot, right? Now, in 2021, you can discharge 50 kW without wires while you're driving. So that's how fast the technology is moving. And I just give you those DOT reference points because we all love our DOT, but we all know our DOT. They don't ever want to be out front on something that's not meeting safety and not meeting operational requirements. And I'm telling you that Michigan DOT and Indiana DOT are out there with real projects. So I'm just trying to help you to right size the technology and the capabilities as this is moving so quickly.
Okay. All right. Well, Ally, thank you very, very much for your presentation. We'll be going in shortly into session, and I encourage all the members, because of our limited time and so much material to go over, to contact each of our presenters today and talk with them if you have any questions dealing with electric charging, capacity, and so forth and so on. And to the presenters, thank you very much. We're grateful that y'all came. Thank you very much for sharing that information, and meeting adjourned. Thank you.